Welcome to another wonderful Marjorie Evans audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Marjorie Evans, contemporary Christian romance author. Now find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. Loving You Again. Chapter 1. Marlie Kinberg put the finishing touches on the client's website and then rolled back in her office chair to gaze at it. Bright, colorful, imaginative. She smiled. The website was a definite winner, and she was confident the client would love it. She gently patted the edge of her screen, breathed a silent thank you, and logged off. "You done?" her coworker Chantal asked, peering over into Marlie's cubby. "Yep, all done." "You fly, girl." Chantal shook her head. "I'm still knee-deep in the Traeger account." Marlie shrugged. "Can't help it if I'm fast." She laughed and bent down to retrieve her purse from under her desk. Then she stood and faced Chantal. Chantal barely cleared Marlie's cubicle wall. Her coworker was short, but whatever she lacked in height, she made up for in personality. Marlie, on the other hand, was taller than average, and she enjoyed it. Although she certainly hadn't when she was younger. She'd gained her full 5 feet 9 inches by 8th grade, while most of the boys still floundered in the valley at about 5 feet 5. But during high school, they'd caught up neatly and even surpassed her, much to Marlie's delight. "You traipsing about town with dreamy Jared again tonight?" Chantal asked. Marlie grinned. "You know it." Chantal leaned forward, practically scaling the cubicle wall. "He gonna do it tonight?" Marlie set her purse on her desk. She bit the corner of her lip. "I don't know. Maybe." Chantal squealed. "I knew it." "Shoo. You want everyone to hear?" "Why not? If I had the catch of the century about to put a ring on my finger, I'd take out time on the nightly news." Marlie laughed. "You would not. Besides, I'm not certain he's going to propose." "Yeah, you are." Marlie tossed her head. "Maybe a little." She giggled. "It has been over a year, you know. Some people get engaged after a few weeks." Marlie picked up her purse again and draped it over her shoulder. "Too fast for me. How can they be sure in that little bit of time?" "Beats me, but I wouldn't mind trying it on for size." "You'll find your man," Marlie assured her. "You just need more patience." "Patience?" Re-GHT. Chantal grimaced, drawing out the word. "What I need is to lose about 10 pounds of chocolate cake off my thighs and to meet Jared's brother." "He doesn't have a brother." "I know. Maybe he can get one." "You're crazy, you know that?" Marlie smiled at her. "I'm off. See you tomorrow. If he asks, you text me. You hear?" Chantal called after her. Marlie raised her arm to show she'd heard and hurried out of the office onto the busy Indianapolis street. A strong gust of wind whipped through her dark curls, sending tendrils of hair into her eyes. She brushed them away with her hand, turning east. Robust winds often ushered spring into Indiana, and for that fact alone, Marlie welcomed them. She wasn't a winter person, and each year she waited impatiently for spring to arrive, which in Indiana was much later than she would like. But still, it always finally did arrive, in bits and bursts as the state worked to shed its layer of ice and cold. Jared, on the other hand, loved winter, one of the areas in which they didn't agree. But then he was into skiing and ice fishing and in general freezing his behind off in the cold. Of course, Indiana wasn't exactly the best place to ski, since the majority of the state was as flat as a magazine cover. Till Michigan was right next door. The sidewalks were crowded, mainly with other 9-to-5ers escaping their offices for the commute home. Marlie didn't have far to go. Recently, she'd taken a small apartment right in the center of town. The price was way out of proportion to the space she got, but it saved her in commuting costs. Many days, her car didn't budge from its parking slot under the building. On that particular afternoon, it didn't matter anyway. Jared was meeting her at Michelle's dining spot, an easy walk away. Marlie loved their pasta and looked forward to dinner. At the corner, she waited until the light changed and then dashed across the street. The wind was still whipping and she held onto the hem of her short coat, keeping it down. Others were also clasping their scarves and sweaters or jackets against the wind. Ahead was Michelle's. Marlie scanned the area for Jared and then she saw him. He stood beside a planter full of tulips and daffodils and waved at her. He looked excited and her pulse quickened. She wondered if he really was going to pop the question that evening. She hoped so. It was time, wasn't it? Otherwise, what were they doing? Both of them were well established in their careers. Both of them were solvent. And both of them were in their late 20s. "Hey, Marlie," he greeted her with a kiss on her cheek. His lips were cold on her skin and she squirmed. "How long have you been waiting?" she asked. "About 15 minutes or so." "Why didn't you wait inside?" He shrugged. "No reason." "You ready to go in?" She nodded, and he held the door for her. Once inside, the coziness of the place wrapped its arms around her. The soft strains of Italian opera filled the room. Marlie smiled at the hostess, who knew them well. "I have your table ready," she said, leading them to a spot in the back corner where they were ensured privacy. "I'll send your waitress right over." "Thank you, Ruth," Marlie said. "Yes, thanks," Jared concurred. He held out Marlie's chair for her. Once they were both seated, Jared leaned forward. "How was your day?" "Productive," Marlie said. "I got a lot done. How about you?" "A zoo. Everyone is completely stressed out with all the restructuring." "Oh, yeah. Right. Of course. I forgot about your new management team." Marlie smiled. Jared had told her earlier, in painful detail, about all the upset in his accountant firm. "Well, no matter. We're here together now," he said, taking her hand. The waitress, a very young-looking girl with a riot of black curls, came to their table. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Just water and lemon for me," Marlie said. "Me too," Jared agreed. Marlie frowned slightly. She'd expected him to say champagne, even though he knew she didn't really drink. But didn't everyone have a sip of champagne when they became engaged? She swallowed. Had she been reading him wrong all this time? Lord, she was a fool. "What's wrong?" Jared asked, opening his menu. "What?" "Nothing." "Nothing's wrong," she replied. "Except for the fact that you aren't going to ask me to marry you." He set his menu aside. "I've been wanting to talk to you." Marlie's heart lurched. "Oh, yeah. I kind of thought it'd be nice to talk here at our favorite restaurant." Was it their favorite restaurant? She supposed it was. "Oh," she repeated. He straightened his menu until it was even with the edge of the table. "Yeah." He looked at her. "We've been together for a while now." Her breathing turned shallow. This was it. "More than a year or so," she agreed. "That's a long time." He cleared his throat. "I was thinking that we might want to celebrate somehow. With something really special." The air seeped from her lungs. What was he talking about? Well, this might have been a bit presumptuous of me, but I booked a cruise." He reached into the inner pocket of his suit coat, bringing out a brochure for a Caribbean cruise. She stared at it stupidly, unable to think of a thing to say. "A cruise?" Chapter 2. Jared continued. And while we're on the cruise, we can talk about our future. If you understand my meaning. Good grief. The man was practically stuttering. Had he lost his ability to speak? What was he saying, anyway? That on the cruise he was going to ask her to marry him? Is that what this was about? And if so, what was wrong with asking her right then? She was ready. More than ready. Another thought grabbed her, and her stomach soured. Wait a minute. Did you book 2 cabins or 1? He knew her stance on intimacy before marriage. It wasn't going to happen. She'd seen way too many train wrecks in that department with her friends. Besides, she'd made a vow to God when she was a teen. She'd kept it all this time, even though sometimes she wondered at her own sanity, and she wasn't about to break it now. He blinked. What? Come on, Marlie. It's been a year. A year? Do you know how ridiculous that is? I've been way patient. She gaped at him. We've discussed this more than once. You agreed. You said you thought I was admirable. His expression tightened, and he didn't say anything. Marlie's stomach churned, and for a panicked instant, she thought she was going to be sick. She clamped her mouth shut and worked at swallowing. Finally, Jared wilted a bit. His shoulders slumped. I thought you'd be happy about the cruise. I thought you'd jump at this chance. Do you understand what I'm saying, Marlie? Do you understand that on the cruise I planned for us to talk about our future? She gaped at him. Is this you trying to tell me that we might become engaged on the cruise? He recoiled as if she'd slapped him. No. And what a way to jerk the romance out of my surprise. She leaned across the table. What a way to stomp all over my wishes. What a way to try to disregard my promise to God and myself. Her voice had turned nasty and she hated that, but she was getting angrier by the second. He stuffed the brochure back into his pocket. Just forget I mentioned it. I can probably get my money back since I'm within 24 hours of purchase. Ruth returned with their water. She took one look at Marlie's face, plunked the water on the table, and scurried away. You scared the waitress, Jared said, a clear attempt at humor. But Marlie wasn't laughing. A sadness had taken hold of her. I think we need to talk. We are talking. No. I think we need to talk about our future right now. She looked at Jared sitting across from her. She looked into his familiar gray eyes, the very eyes she could get lost in. But right then, she felt a distance between them she'd never felt before. He cleared his throat. You're angry. I don't think this is a good idea. Marlie blinked back her tears. Do you even understand why I'm upset? Do you? You're mad because I booked only 1 room. You know we could put some kind of barrier between us in bed if it means so much to you. If you're that turned off by me. How unfair, she said, staring at him. Don't twist this. I'm twisting nothing. We've been together for a year. You're living in the Stone Ages, and now I'm the bad guy? Marlie exhaled. You're not the bad guy. She hesitated for a moment and then went on. I thought you were on board with my decision to wait. You acted like you were. He grabbed her hand in his. I was on board. First. But it's been a year. I know how long it's been, Jared. Did you plan on proposing to me on the cruise or not? Marlie was stunned at her nerve to ask outright. She wasn't usually quite so upfront, but she suddenly had a burning need to know. He leaned back in his chair and didn't let go of her hand. Probably. I don't know. I don't have everything planned. She raised one brow. Jared, you plan everything. Down to the last teeny detail. You do know. His face reddened slightly. She sat up straighter and stared at him. You weren't going to, were you? I thought that we should go to the next phase. Maybe live together. With the millions of divorces today, it's only smart to start there. Her mouth dropped open, and she felt her entire future crash down around her shoulders. Do you know me at all? Even the tiniest bit? She pulled her hand free from his and started to get up. He snatched her hand again and pulled her back down. Don't run off. We need to discuss this. She shook her head. No. No. Not right now. I need air. I need to go. She grabbed her purse, jolted from her chair, and ran out of the restaurant. Marlie! Marlie cringed as she kept running. She dodged around other pedestrians. She felt like a fool running down the street, but she couldn't help herself. Marlie, please. Stop. Wait. They were attracting more and more attention. It was humiliating, and she still had another couple blocks to her apartment. Finally, she got a hold of herself and stopped. Within seconds, Jared caught up with her. He was panting heavily. Marlie, please, he paused, trying to regain his breath. Don't run away from me. She was panting too, although not as heavily. She pressed her lips together and looked at him. He touched her shoulder, but she backed away. Marlie, I am sorry. He gulped in air. It was stupid of me. I don't know what I was thinking. But Jared always knew what he was thinking. He was the most organized anal person Marlie knew. What she couldn't understand was when his head thinking changed. They discussed her wish to remain chaste until marriage. In fact, he'd even used the old-fashioned word chaste first, which had made her smile. He'd been totally on board with her decision. So what had changed? And when? Was she so out of touch with her own boyfriend that she hadn't even noticed? I can't lose you, he said, reaching out again. This time, she allowed him to grasp her hand. It was stupid. Can we please just rewind the evening? Start over? Her eyes welled with tears. She wasn't at all sure she could do that. I don't know, she mumbled. Marlie, can we go back to the restaurant? Please? She shook her head. Not now. It's too embarrassing. Okay. Another restaurant? She shrugged. Maybe. I can't lose you. You mean too much to me. She heard his words and she wanted to believe them. But if she meant so much to him, why would he have even suggested such a thing? He had to know what her reaction was going to be. When she didn't move, he stepped closer. Come on. Please? For some reason, Marlie seemed unable to move. It was as if her feet had somehow become attached to the sidewalk. Even with the people jostling by them, she couldn't seem to move. Okay. You're right, Marlie. Jared's face grew frantic. Let's get married. Let's do it. She gaped at him. Let's do it? She blinked rapidly, trying to come to terms with the entire last 20 minutes. Had he just proposed to her with the words, let's do it? If you could see your face, he said, giving her an uncertain look. I've shocked you. I can see that. Let's go find a nice quiet place to talk. He looked around. Your apartment isn't far. Shall we just go there? My apartment? She repeated as if in a daze. He pulled on her arm and somehow her feet became unstuck. She stumbled along next to him as he guided her down the street toward her apartment. When they climbed the steps to her building, she mechanically got out her pass card and beeped them in. They got into the elevator and went up to the 3rd floor. Her apartment was only 2 doors down. She opened the door and they went inside. She'd left the living room window open and it was cool inside. Jared went straight to the window and shut it. Then he turned to smile at her. Shall we sit? She nodded and sank to her couch, setting her purse on the floor beside her. I messed up, Marlie. I thought that since, well, it doesn't matter anymore. Let's get married. I mean it. She stared into his eyes and tried to read what was there. She knew his proposal was simply a reaction to the disastrous evening, and she couldn't possibly agree to it. Stop, he said softly. I see your brain working, and I know what you're thinking. You forget how well I know you, Marlie. I do want to marry you. I'm just upping the timeline a little. A little? She asked, leaning away from him. It sounds to me like you're upping it by quite a lot. He shook his head and inched closer. Come here, he said, opening his arms. She allowed herself to be enfolded in his embrace. She'd been in his arms so many times over the last year that it felt familiar, comfortable, and she began to breathe easier again. Maybe she was making too much of all of this. She did love him, and he said he loved her. She relaxed a bit, and he sighed. That's better, he said. He pulled away enough to look her in the eye. So, is it a yes? She blinked back her tears and took a deep breath. Wasn't this what she wanted? To be engaged to Jared? To marry him and raise a family together? Hadn't she decided that it was time? She nodded and saw the look of relief in his eyes. Good, he said, leaning forward to kiss her. That's my girl. This reality was so far from the image she had of getting engaged that she wondered if it was really even happening. Where was the elation she had anticipated? Where was the joyous desire to shout it to the world, or at the very least to shout it to her closest friends? It seemed surreal somehow. She almost wanted to pinch herself and pinch Jared. Her cell phone buzzed in her purse. She glanced down. Let it go to voicemail, Jared urged. We have a lot to plan. The buzzing quit and then started again. Whoever was calling didn't want to leave a message. She wondered if it was Chantal wanting a report on the evening. But it was too early for that. The buzzing continued. Sorry. I have to get it, she said, digging the phone out of her purse. She glanced at the screen. It's my dad. Her chest tightened. Her dad never called her. Chapter 3. Dad. Hey, pumpkin. How are you? Something was odd with his voice. Where's Mom? What's happened? She stood up from the couch. Why are you calling? A beat of silence, and then, your mother's in the hospital. Marlie plummeted back to the couch. Why? What's wrong? They think it's a stroke. Marlie gulped. A stroke? Yes. Her dad cleared his throat. She's all right, but there's been damage. Damage? We'll know more tomorrow. Another silence. But she'll need therapy. Probably will be in a nursing home for a while. Or a rehabilitation center. A nursing home? Marlie's eyes filled with tears. Her mother was barely 60 years old. But she'll be all right. I'm sure she will be. But it's going to take time. I'm coming home. I can leave right now. No, you can't. Right now. I'll just pack some things and tell my boss. Marlie, listen to me. I don't want you driving all night. You can leave in the morning. That's plenty soon enough. Your mom is being cared for right now. Nothing will change before tomorrow. Please. I can't be worrying about you, too. It was at times like this that Marlie wished she had a sibling, one who lived closer to her parents. But there were none, as Marlie was an only child. The drive to her parents' bed and breakfast in Tennessee would take about 8 hours. But if she left right then... Marlie, her dad said sharply. She blanched. What? I mean it. Wait until tomorrow to come. Promise me. Marlie tried to swallow past the lump in her throat. All right. I promise. Her dad exhaled. Thank you. Now, please don't worry. She's resting peacefully right now. The doctors are checking on her regularly. I'm staying here. They let you now, you know. Okay. Okay, good. Promise me you'll call with any changes. I don't care if it's in the middle of the night. I promise. When did this happen? A bit ago. I called as soon as I could. I wanted to have something to tell you. Marlie blew out her breath. So, her mother had been having a stroke at the very same time she and Jared had been arguing about sleeping together. Suddenly seemed so completely ludicrous to her. She turned her attention toward Jared, who was observing her with obvious concern. All right, Dad. I'm hanging up, but I'll be heading out at first light tomorrow morning. I know. I love you, honey. I'm sorry to have to give you such news. I'll see you tomorrow. Kiss Mom for me. You know I will. Marlie hung up and stared blankly into space. Her mother in the hospital? Her mother with a stroke? Would she be able to speak? Walk? Move normally? A wave of nausea filled her, and she put her arms around herself. Marlie! Mom had a stroke, she muttered, barely believing the words that came out of her mouth. I have to go. Of course you do. I need to call my boss. Can I help you? She looked at him and shook her head. No. I'll do it. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. But I guess you heard that. I'm sorry. I hope she's all right. He stood. I guess I should be going. Let you do what you need to do. She barely heard him. He leaned forward and kissed her cheek. Bye. Bye. She was already trying to figure out everything she had to accomplish to be gone for an extended period of time. Marlie, Jared said from the door. Huh? What? Are we engaged or not? She blinked. Engaged? Her mind was a jumble and she could barely think straight. Well, he pushed when she didn't answer. I guess so, she said, wishing he would just go. She picked up her phone. She had so many things to take care of. Would her neighbor collect her mail? Or would it just stack up in her box until it bulged through the opening? And what about her job? She did have some vacation time coming. She supposed she could take that. The front door closed and she looked across the room. Jared was gone. Had she even said goodbye? A flash of regret moved through her but was quickly crowded out by everything else on her mind. Oh, Mom, she breathed. Be all right. Please be all right. Chapter 4. I'm so sorry, Marlie, Chantal told her the next morning. I'm glad you're already on your way. I'll take care of everything I can for you here. What did the boss say? I'm using vacation time. But you should have some emergency time or something. You know, when a family member is sick. I can work that out later. Taking vacation just seemed easier right now. And I might be able to do some work from Tennessee. I don't know. Everything's so up in the air. Is Jared going with you? What? Jared? Yeah. Is he there with you? Marlie frowned. No. Why would he be? I don't know. 'Cause he loves you. Because he's concerned about your mother. He has to work. And he has no vacation time? Marlie grew irritated. I don't know. Visions of the cruise brochure filled her mind. No. He didn't come. He's not coming. Just seems like he'd want to. Chantal exhaled. All right. I can tell I'm annoying you. I'll shut up. I'm really sorry about your mom, though. Thanks. Keep me posted. Promise? I will. Do you need me to stop by your apartment while you're gone? Take in your mail? Feed your fish? I don't have fish, Marlie said, wondering why Jared hadn't offered to stop by. I know you don't. But surely there's something I can do for you. I don't know. I'll call if there is. All right. Be safe, Marlie. I'll be praying for your mom. Thanks. I put her on the prayer chain at North Avenue Church, too. Good. Bye, Chantal. Marlie hung up and restarted her car. She'd stopped at a gas station to call Chantal. She hadn't taken the time the night before, and she'd started out so early that morning that she knew Chantal would have still been asleep. Marlie had been on the road for a good hour and a half by then. The freeways were starting to fill up with morning commuters. She cranked up her stereo in hopes of crowding out the worrisome thoughts filling her mind. It didn't help much. The only thing that was going to help her was to see her mother for herself. Just over 6 more hours of driving. She reached into her bag of corn nuts and popped a handful into her mouth. Whenever she drove any distance alone, she brought corn nuts. Nothing kept her awake as well as crunching the hard, salty kernels. But right then, they tasted like sawdust in her mouth. Please, please be all right, Mom, she pleaded for the millionth time. Her parents owned and ran the fairly successful Bedford Bed and Breakfast in Bedford, Tennessee. They'd bought the older mansion 8 years before, had it restored, and opened for business a year after that. It was their second career and their lifesaver, according to her mom. Both her parents had retired from professorships and had been at complete loose ends when they retired. Marlie had worried for their health during that time as their world shrank smaller and smaller. But then they'd had the brainstorm and opened a bed and breakfast. They'd wasted no time either. Within months, they were house hunting and everything about them changed. Their outlook on life, their reason to get up in the morning, their vigor and energy. It was a marvel, and Marlie hadn't worried about them since. But now? Had there been signs that her mother was heading for a stroke? Marlie probably wouldn't have seen then anyway. She rarely went back home, something she now regretted. But going home was complicated. Of course, she loved seeing her parents and enjoyed staying at their bed and breakfast, but there were memories in Bedford, and not all of them good. Mark Talley for one. Marlie sighed heavily and cranked her music up even louder, as if that might erase her embarrassment. Mark Talley was her cousin. Well, not really her cousin. Not by blood, anyway. But he'd spent so much time at her cousin's house that she'd always considered him a relative. Until their late teen years, when she had realized with no small amount of glee that she had no blood connection with him, and the floods had broken loose. Her intense desire for him had gone wild. She'd taken every opportunity to be around him. She couldn't help but admire his tall, fresh good looks. She loved the way his wavy brown hair had fallen over his left brow. She loved the way his dark blue eyes grew even darker when he was excited about something. She loved the way he protected her cousins, looking out for them as if they truly were his siblings. She loved the way he laughed and how the joyous sound would fill the room. She thought she was being quite secretive about her crush until the day of the county fair. She'd gone with her cousins, Sally and Austin, along with Mark that Sunday afternoon. First stop was the cotton candy stall. They'd all purchased and then torn off pieces of the pink sweetness as they wandered through the 4-H animal section. Look! Marlie had cried when they got to the rabbits. She'd never seen such rabbits in her life. She was thrilled with the long ears that hung down like 2 braids on the side of their heads. Their ears are so long. Sally, 2 years younger than her, started to laugh. Geez, Marlie, they're rabbits. What did you expect? Horse ears? She'd cracked up then, slapping Austin, who started guffawing too, as if Marlie was the dumbest person he knew. That in itself was bad enough, but then Mark had joined in. Marlie attempted to laugh with them, but Sally just wouldn't let it go. By the time they arrived at the Ferris wheel, she was calling Marlie rabbit ears and rabbit nose, and something in Marlie snapped. Shut up, Sally. she'd cried. "It's not like you're so pretty." As soon as the words left Marlie's lips, she felt dreadful. Sally had a slight deformity in her left ear. It wasn't the same shape as a normal ear, sticking out too far with a fairly pronounced point on the top. Sally's father had said that he would get it taken care of as soon as Sally was older, but at that point, nothing had been done. Sally was sensitive to a fault, and understandably so. Marlie had tried to take the comment back, but it was too late. Sally was mortified, and the look of shock and disappointment on Mark's face burned into her. But it didn't stop there. "And you love Mark. Don't pretend you don't." Sally had screamed in retaliation. Mark's beautiful eyes had nearly popped out. Marlie was so humiliated that she ran off, a 17-year-old girl running off like she was a petulant 2-year-old. Mark followed her, yelling her name. She dashed behind the long, low building that held the 4-H sheep, thinking he wouldn't find her. But he did. "Marlie?" he asked, panting. She was plastered against the back wall, wishing she were anywhere but there. "She's lying. You don't like me?" Marlie had frowned. "Yes, I do, but I don't." Not like she said. She'd wondered if the Lord would strike her dead for telling such a massive lie. Mark had stepped closer, and Marlie was sure her heart was going to beat right out of her chest. "Marlie, we're friends. That's all." Of course," she stammered. "I know that. I just wouldn't want you to think otherwise." She'd wanted to die. She wished that God would have struck her dead for lying. And then Mark leaned over and kissed her cheek. "You're like a sister to me." A sister? Then why was his kiss searing a hole in her skin? Why was she gulping at the very scent of him? I know. And then he'd smiled at her and left. After that, Marlie had done everything possible to avoid Mark Talley. A year later, she ran into him at a gas station. He was pumping gas into his beat-up Mustang, which she knew from Sally was his pride and joy. She tried to duck back into her car, but it was too late. "Hello, Marlie," he said. Hello." She turned away and uncapped her gas tank to fill it. Through all this time, he still had the power to turn her into a bumbling fool. Without meaning to, she glanced up again. He smiled at her. But it wasn't a normal smile. It was a smile that said he hadn't forgotten anything. And for a brief second, it was like they were back at the fair again. Like he'd just learned she had a crush on him. Like she was still 17 years old instead of 18. But it had passed quickly. Mainly because she hadn't stuck around to fill her gas tank as planned. She put in a couple dollars worth, put her gas cap back on, and drove away as if the devil himself was after her. Marlie grimaced and tried to relax her grip on the steering wheel. That had been years ago. For all she knew, Mark Talley was long gone from Bedford. She rarely spoke with Sally, only an occasional message on social media. Mark Talley was surely living somewhere else. She hoped so. She was in no mood to hide from him again, and she had no confidence that she wouldn't do just that if the need arose. Her thoughts wandered to her parents' bed and breakfast. She wondered if it was full. And if it was, who was taking care of the guests right then? Who was cooking them breakfast? Her conversations with her dad had only been about her mother. Marlie wondered if she should stretch her week vacation longer. She hardly thought her mother would be back at work within a week. Chapter 5. Marlie was in the hospital parking lot by 2 o'clock that afternoon. Before jumping out of the car, she took a moment to text Jared. Arrived. Going into the hospital now. She also texted Chantal. Her phone pinged as she was getting out. She looked at it, assuming it was Jared. But it was Chantal. Thanks for telling me. Good luck. Give your mom my love. Marlie smiled. Chantal didn't even know her mother. She tucked her phone back into her purse and hurried into the entryway. Inside, there was a desk to her right with a sign that said information. She went straight over. "I'm here to see my mom. Her name's Linda Kinberg." The somewhat plump, elderly woman checked her monitor. "Ah, here she is. Room 301. She looked up, her sharp gray eyes gleaming with friendliness. "Follow that red line until you get past those doors there. You'll find the elevator that will take you right on up." "Thank you," Marlie responded. Her stomach felt slightly queasy, and it had nothing to do with the off-putting hospital smells. Marlie didn't know what to expect, what kind of shape her mother would be in. She was eager to see her but scared at the same time. She hoped her father would be in the room. But of course he would be, wouldn't he? She found the elevator easily enough and pushed the button to the third floor. Her mother's room was directly across from the elevator. She pushed the door open. Her dad jumped up from his chair and crossed over to her, taking her into his arms for a big bear hug. Marlie rested on his shoulder for a quick second before pulling away. She stared at her mother, lying in the elevated bed. Her light blue eyes were open and she focused on Marlie. Part of her face looked happy to see her. The other part remained in dull folds, unmoving. "Mom," Marlie said, moving closer. She carefully took her right hand in hers. "How are you doing?" Linda blinked rapidly and opened her mouth, but no sound came. She frowned, again with only half her face. "Don't worry," Marlie said quickly. "You don't have to tell me. You look fine. Like you're ready to beat this thing and come home." Come home? Why had she said that? What was wrong with her? By the looks of her mother, she wouldn't be coming home for weeks and weeks. Marlie suppressed the shudder that moved through her. Her dad, no doubt understanding her dilemma, intervened. "Your mom is looking much better," he stated. "She's already making huge progress. The doctors are encouraged. She'll be speaking again in no time." His voice was strong, but Marlie heard the doubt behind it. She looked at him and saw the shadows in his eyes. "Do you have guests at the bed and breakfast?" she asked. He nodded. "They know. One of them volunteered to make breakfast for everyone. She's a cook of sorts, so we lucked out for today." "Well, I'm here now," Marlie said. "I can cook and also clean the rooms. Don't worry. I'm here for a week, maybe more." "A week?" Dan Kinberg asked. The relief was starkly evident in his glance. "How'd you manage that?" "Vacation time. And don't you worry. I'm here to help." She took a deep breath. "I can stay with Mom for a while if you want to go home and shower." "I showered here," he said. "Are you hungry? We can go down to the cafeteria." "I'm hungry." "I didn't stop to eat. Only corn nuts." He laughed, knowing her habit of eating corn nuts while driving. "Then let me buy you lunch. Food here isn't half bad." Marlie went to her mother and kissed her cheek. "We'll be back in a jiff, Mom." She felt strange leaving when she'd just gotten there, but she knew her dad would speak more freely out of her mother's hearing, and she was eager to learn what he had to say. They were silent in the elevator down to the lower level where the kitchen was located. Once they'd gone through the line and chosen their entrees, her dad paid and they sat in the back corner of the cafeteria. "Dad? How is she really?" Her father sighed heavily and tears flooded his eyes. He swiped at them impatiently. "We've got a long road ahead of us," he said. "It's true, the doctors are pleased with how she's doing right now, but she's going to need a lot of therapy. We don't know everything yet, but she can't speak much. She'll get that back, won't she? In time. And with therapy. It's not going to be easy. Can she walk? Too soon to tell." The doctors were more concerned with swallowing and speaking. Marlie sank back against her chair. This was worse than she'd imagined. And her face, she asked, knowing that looks weren't the most important factor, but also knowing that her mother had always been vain about how young she looked. We just don't know. I'm afraid it might be marred forever. Marlie tried to take it in. She felt as if she were swirling in a giant vortex. Her mother had always been the strong one. Everyone counted on her. She was always there, always the same, always doling out good advice, always the first one that people turned to in a crisis. And now, well, now she was in crisis. Marlie's eyes burned with tears. Go ahead and cry, her dad said. I've hardly stopped since it happened. I've been trying to put on a brave face in her room. His voice dwindled, and Marlie reached over and grabbed his hand. It's going to be all right, she said. Mom's strong. And stubborn. She's going to need both, her dad uttered. Marlie let go of his hand and picked up her fork. We need to eat. I don't have much of an appetite. Me neither. But we need to eat anyway. Marlie! A deep voice rang out behind her. Marlie turned and looked up at the man standing there. Her heart jolted and she dropped her fork. He grinned, showing gleaming white teeth. His eyes sparkled with recognition. I don't believe it, he said. He pulled out a chair and sat down beside her. What are you doing here? She blinked at him, her mind hardly registering his presence. Mark Talley looked between her and her dad. Oh no. What's happened? He asked. Hello, Dan. Linda is here. She's had a stroke. Mark's forehead instantly creased, and his face registered alarm. I'm so sorry. How is she doing? When did this happen? Just yesterday. She's holding her own. I'm so sorry. Marlie watched him, watched his sincerity, watched the way his eyes reflected his concern for her mother. Her eyes traveled over him as he spoke with her father. He was more filled out than the last time she'd seen him, which was when? 3 or more years ago. His shoulders were broader, and they now strained slightly under his button-down white shirt. His sleeves were rolled up and she saw a small tattoo of a ship above the backside of his wrist. His chin was shadowed with the beginnings of a beard. Or maybe he simply hadn't shaved that morning. He was looking at her, his clear blue eyes intent on hers. What? She stuttered. Had he asked her something? When did you get in? Just a bit ago, she said. I drove down this morning. He nodded. Still in Indiana? Still in Indiana. She smiled, or at least she thought she did. Even after all these years, the man unnerved her. Wait, why are you here? She asked. Oh, he said, looking momentarily sheepish. Just stopping by to visit someone. A patient. No. Someone who works here. He leaned back and studied her. Did your dad tell you? Tell me what? I'm working on a gazebo at the bed and breakfast. Still in its early stages. I'm fitting it in around my other contracts. Contracts? I'm in construction, he said, smiling widely now. She raised her brow and glanced at her dad. No. He didn't tell me. If he was working on the gazebo at her parents' and if she would be staying there, that meant they would be continually running into each other. A flush of pleasure crept over her, until she was jolted back to reality by the thought of her boyfriend. Or was Jared her fiancé now? Everything had been so rushed and confusing and… Marlie! She gave a start. Oh. Construction. That's nice. That's nice? Good grief, what an inane comment. She blinked, completely flustered. He chuckled. Yeah. It's nice. He leaned closer. So, did you come alone? Yes. Of course. Of course? What was that supposed to mean? She squirmed in her chair, wishing he would leave. She was making a complete fool of herself. As if hearing her thoughts, he got up and pushed his chair back under the table. It was real nice seeing you again, Marlie. And Dan, I'm sorry about Linda. I'm sure she'll recover quickly. I'll stop by to see her in a day or two. Give her a little more time. She'd like that, Dan said, tearing up again. Goodbye, Marlie. He looked at her, holding her eyes for just a second longer than necessary. Tingles went down her spine. Bye, she said in a near whisper. And then he was gone. Chapter 6. Marlie turned to her father. You never told me Mark was working for you. Dan shrugged. Never thought about it. He comes by frequently, doing all sorts of things for us. And I know he doesn't charge even half of what his other customers pay. So, he's a handyman of sorts? Dan laughed. Hardly. Owns Tally Construction. Has a whole parcel of men working for him. He just takes time to help us out. Marlie put her fingers to her lips. I see. Dan shook himself. All right now. Since I've got you here, why not catch me up a bit on your life? How's your young man? Jared. Is there another? She shook her head. Jared's fine. And we're engaged, or at least I think we are, she thought, but didn't say. I kind of thought he'd come down here with you. The second person to suggest that, she realized. No. He had work. Dan cleared his throat. Yes, well, of course. He had work. Marlie bristled and then wondered at her reaction. Why did she feel like she had to defend him? And why did that make her angry? He would have come if he could, but would he have? He hadn't even mentioned the possibility. She frowned. What was she thinking? Of course, he would have come if he'd been free. He loved her, and by extension would be very concerned about her mother. She pulled her cell phone from her purse and glanced at the screen. There it was. A message from him. Oh, Jared's messaged. Hang on, she said to her dad and clicked it open. Glad you made it safe. Hope your mother is fine. How long will you be staying? What does he say? She swallowed. He's concerned about Mom. I wish we had better news for him. We will, Dad. It's early stages yet. She dropped her phone back into her purse. She would answer Jared later. The main thing right then was to reassure her dad and go spend time sitting by her mother's bed. Mark Tally climbed into his pickup and turned the ignition. The truck roared to life and he pulled out of the hospital parking lot. Marlie Kinberg. He hadn't seen her for years. She looked good. No, better than good. She'd pulled her long brown hair into a messy bun at the nape of her neck. He wondered what it would look like, falling over her shoulders. Once, when they were teens, they'd wrestled over a bowl of popcorn and her hair had fallen over his arm. It had felt like a soft blanket and had smelled of flowers. Honeysuckle, maybe? If he ran his fingers through it, would it still be that soft? He blinked. Good Lord. He and Marlie didn't even know each other anymore. And since that super awkward moment at the fair long ago, they'd hardly spoken 3 words to each other. But he found himself drawn to her. Over the years, he'd asked Sally and her brother Austin about Marlie occasionally, but that was it. Sally and Austin were Marlie's cousins, and they didn't even see her much. Evidently, once Marlie had moved to Indiana, she'd pretty much disappeared from everyone's life. Did she have a guy? A girl that pretty probably did. Wait, maybe she was married. He should have glanced at her left hand. At least, he'd had the presence of mind to ask if she'd come alone. He didn't fancy meeting her husband unexpectedly at the bed and breakfast. But then, why not? What was it to him? Not a darn thing. And besides, he was dating Rachel and she was fine. He'd eaten with Rachel at the hospital cafeteria, which was why he'd been there. He smiled and turned down Render Lane. He'd stop at his house and change clothes before heading to his work site. His men were already there, and he expected to see a lot of progress from the morning shift. Imagine Marlie Kinberg showing up like that. He shook his head. Had she come a few minutes earlier, she would have seen him and Rachel eating a late lunch. Rachel often worked the shift from 6 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She was a cashier and, frankly, anything else that was needed. Sometimes she even did some of the cooking, but she enjoyed it, and that was what mattered. She was going to school to work with children, and her hospital job was a means to an end. For some reason, which Mark preferred not to ponder, he was glad that Marlie hadn't seen him and Rachel together. He checked on his men and did some paperwork and had 2 meetings with clients. He planned to head over to the Kinbergs and work on the gazebo. Now that he knew Linda was in the hospital, he was even more eager to get the job done. It'd be nice for her to come home to a completed gazebo. Project had been her idea in the first place. She'd been quite specific with the details, spending more than one afternoon with Mark at the local lumber store, choosing just the right wood and just the right filigree. Mark smiled at the memory. He liked Linda. She was spunky and energetic and had a great sense of humor. How in the world had a woman like that had a stroke? Would she ever be her old self again? Questions made him sad. Poor Dan. He must really be going through it. And Marlie. He remembered that Marlie and her mom had always been close. Whether they still were, he had no idea, but he imagined a closeness like that would be for life. Something he would never know. Sally's and Austin's folks were the closest thing he had to parents. His own mother and father couldn't be bothered with him, not even while he was growing up. Taking refuge at the Andersons' home had saved his life. He couldn't imagine what or who he'd be if not for them. He pulled into his driveway and parked his truck in front of his double garage. He owned the 4-bedroom home outright. In truth, he'd built a lot of it himself. He was proud of it. He'd even gone so far as to have a professional decorator help him furnish it. Between the two of them, the house had become a warm, comfortable space that made him feel good every time he walked in the door. He walked in now and threw his keys on the entry table below a large mirror. He went straight to the master bedroom and changed into his nicer work clothes. With the 2 meetings he had scheduled, he needed to look sharp. He took out his black jeans and a royal blue button-down shirt. He took off his running shoes and switched them out for his dark loafers. He ran his hand through his brown hair and checked himself in his mirror. He needed a haircut, but other than that, he was good to go. He glanced at the watch on his tracker. He had just enough time to check on the site before making it to his meetings. He wondered what Marlie was doing right then. She had probably gone back up to see her mother. Mark had made plans to pick up Rachel that evening to go to the movies, but he found his eagerness for the evening flagging. Maybe Dan would have more news on Linda by tonight. Was he spending the night in the hospital? Would Marlie stay there too? Perhaps he should be available for a call. He snorted. Right. Like Dan would call him. He hardly thought so. Of course, Dan would keep him updated when he saw him, but he didn't really believe Marlie's dad would go out of his way to let him know. He might as well admit it. Marlie Kinberg had thrown him off his game. Chapter 7. Marlie left the hospital during the dinner hour. She was beyond exhausted, and she could tell that while her presence there was a comfort to her dad, it also wore him out. He kept feeling like they had to chat. Marlie was happy to simply sit there beside her mother, helping out in whatever way she could. More than once, she dabbed at her mother's lips when she saw a bit of drool pooling. Her mother's eyes went from grateful to sheer panic. That frantic look cut through Marlie's heart, and she could almost taste her mother's desperation. When her dad began to slump in his chair, Marlie knew she needed to leave for the evening. "You can find food in the fridge at the inn," Dan told her as she got up and gathered her things. "Dad, I can feed myself. Don't you worry. Or I can take you down to the cafeteria again. Dad, please. I'm fine. You need to focus on Mom and yourself. Do you need me to bring you anything?" He shook his head. "And that meal you ordered doesn't seem like enough." She glanced down at the hospital tray that held a ham sandwich and a clump of potato salad. "I'm not really hungry. You eat every bite, do you hear?" "Yes, Mother," he teased with a tired smile. "I'll be back around 10 or so. You'll sleep in a bit then?" "No. I'll make the guests their breakfast, clean up, and then I'll be in." He frowned. "No. I'll call someone." "Who are you going to call, Dad?" "You know Mom always does the cooking. We have a gal who comes in when we are away." "Right. Like you're ever away." He sighed. "All right. Cook breakfast. There are plenty of supplies. But we do have a girl that is going to come in from noon to 3 to do a bit of cleaning. Maybe you can check the books. I think we have a couple guests leaving today." "Will do. Now, don't you worry. I can handle it. If I'm not in right at 10, then it just means I'm running a bit late. I repeat, don't you worry about a thing." Her father held up both hands. "Not worrying. Promise." She stepped over to him and leaned down to kiss his cheek, and then she was off. In the parking lot, she got into her car and marveled that she had only arrived that very day. It felt like an entire world of days had passed since she'd pulled in. She gripped the steering wheel and leaned her forehead on her hands. "Dear God," she breathed, "please help my mother. Help us all." Tears filled her eyes and she let them come. Her heart was broken for what had happened to her mother. How would her father ever cope with everything by himself? Would they have to sell the business? They simply couldn't. It was her mother's fondest love. If it was sold, wouldn't that hurt her mother's motivation to fight for recovery? Marlie didn't know. She just didn't know. The tears kept coming and she felt them drip off her chin into her lap. Oh, Mother. 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 She sniffed and wiped at her eyes. She dug into her purse for her cell phone. She texted the bare details to Chantal and then pushed Jared's number. It rang 5 times before he picked up. "Marlie, you're there. How are you doing?" Not so well," she said, struggling to speak through her tears. "Aw, honey. I'm sorry. Your mom not doing well?" "No. I'm sure she'll get better soon." Marlie swallowed but didn't respond. "Marlie, you still there?" "Yeah," she whispered. "And your dad? How's he doing?" "Not so well either." Jared cleared his throat. "It'll get better. You'll see. Did you talk with him about your plans? Did you tell them about us?" "What?" she asked, momentarily confused. "Oh, you mean about us being kind of engaged?" "Kind of." "Geez, Marlie, way to make a guy feel good." She blinked, feeling a fog settle over her brain. "What?" I said, "Way to make a guy feel good." "You mean you never even told your dad about us?" "Jared, I'm exhausted. Please don't scold me. I've been a bit preoccupied." Silence. Then, of course, "Sorry about that." "It's okay." She wanted to hang up. This call was meant to soothe her, but she found herself getting irritated. "Jared, I'm sorry. I'm in a mood. I need to go." "Sure. Okay. Call me later, all right?" "Can you come?" she asked abruptly. "Can you come down here and help?" A beat of quiet. Then, help? What do you mean help? With the bed and breakfast? I don't know. Just be here with me. Babe, you know I can't do that. I only get so many days off. Now, if we were already married, I could probably get a few family days. She listened to him run on and couldn't bear to hear his voice another minute. What was wrong with her? She must be even more tired than she'd thought. I have to go now, she interrupted him. We can talk later. Bye. And she hung up. She stared at the screen as his photo faded into oblivion. Then, tossing the phone onto the passenger seat, she started the car, put it in gear, and drove to her parents' bed and breakfast. Chapter 8. Marlie sat in her car and gazed at the stately house that her parents had turned into a warm, appealing inn. The grounds were lovely, with all the flowers and bushes and grasses. Marlie knew just how much effort had gone into fashioning gardens that gave that whimsical wild look that really was anything but wild. How in the world would her father keep that up? He'd have to hire a gardener. It was fairly certain her mother wouldn't be out there anytime soon, sitting in the dirt and pulling weeds. Marlie sucked in a long breath. She could do that for her, as well as make the breakfasts, manage the guests, supervise the cleaning staff. But if she did, she'd have to stay longer than a week or two. She couldn't bear the thought of her parents losing this business they loved so dearly. But could her dad afford to hire the help needed to replace her mother? How long would it be before her mom could help again? She shuddered. All questions for another day, she thought. Right then, she needed to go inside and check on things. And then she'd grab something to eat and go to bed. She figured that she'd want to be up around 4 the next morning to ensure all was ready for the guests. Actually, she wasn't even certain how many guests were there that night. Sighing, she got out of the car and grabbed her suitcase from the back seat. Then she went inside, admiring, as always, the melodious bell that announced her arrival. All inside was quiet. She wandered into the sitting room, but it was empty. She went back to the entry and circled the large mahogany desk. She turned the ledger around to face her. Running her finger down the signatures and dates, she saw that 4 of the 8 rooms were occupied. She sat in the large wooden captain's chair and clicked on the computer. She waited for it to boot up and then she entered the password, which was her birth date. Long ago, her dad had announced with pleasure how he was using her special day for his password. According to the spreadsheet, 2 more couples were expected the following day, both arriving before noon. None of the present guests were departing. So, just basic maid duties, no stripping of beds or changing linens. Perhaps some new towels. She blew out her breath. Tomorrow shouldn't be too difficult to manage, although her estimation of arriving at the hospital by 10 was probably off by an hour or two. She got up to head to the kitchen when she heard someone on the stairs. She looked up to see a tall, thin woman with graying hair descending. "Hello," the woman said, her voice warm and rich. "I'm wondering about Linda, the owner." "Oh, hello. I'm Marlie, her daughter." The woman came down the stairs a bit faster. "I've been very worried. I'm Greta, the one who cooked breakfast for your mother today." Marlie smiled. "So, you're the angel guest." The woman's cheeks colored and she shook her head. "No, not at all. Just helping out a bit. How is your mother?" "She's holding her own," Marlie said. "She can't speak right now. I'm hoping some of that will return. We're not really sure how extensive the damage is." Greta's expression clouded over. "Such a lovely woman. I'm sorry to hear that. But at least she's stable. And that's something." Marlie nodded. "Yes, that's something. Thank you again for helping out this morning. I'm happy to cook again tomorrow if you need me." "No, but thank you. I'll take over tomorrow. And you'll see a substantial discount on your room." Greta stepped forward and put her hand on Marlie's arm. Don't you dare discount us. My husband and I are having a wonderful time here. We'll pay full price. I mean it. Me cooking breakfast was my idea, and I was happy to do it. Yes, but... No buts. You'll take away my joy if you give us a discount. Marlie's eyes misted over, and she blinked rapidly. All right then. Thank you. Greta smiled. You're welcome. Is there something I can help you with? Not at all. I just heard someone come in and I thought it might be your father. I just wanted an update. She glanced up the stairs. The others will be wanting to know too. Oh. Listen. I'll give them the news. I can see you're tired. Let me handle this, all right? But you'll have to disturb them. They're worried. Not a one of them will mind. In fact, they'll want to know. Don't you worry. Get some rest and I'll see you in the morning. Marlie nodded, marveling at the woman's ability to see a need and take care of it. The last thing she wanted to do was go to everyone and repeat her mother's condition over and over. At least not that evening. She put the computer on sleep mode and went to the kitchen. She opened the large double-door refrigerator and peered inside. The shelves were lined with fruit of all types. She noted quite a few varieties of cheese, too. At least 4 dozen eggs sat on the lower shelf. In the drawers were vegetables. An omelet. That's what she could make for breakfast. And muffins. Along with cut-up fruit, it would be a lovely breakfast. But what about her dinner? She closed the fridge, too tired to even think about it. She wasn't that hungry anyway. She went back to the entryway for her suitcase and then moved to her parents' quarters that were located through a door behind the stairs. They spilled to the back of the first floor. There were 2 bedrooms and a sitting room. Granted, the second bedroom was minute, but no matter. A bed fit in there along with a tiny 3-drawer dresser, and that was all Marlie needed. She was ready to fall into bed when she heard the bell from the front entry. Perhaps it was one of the guests returning from an outing, but she figured she should probably go out and check. She dropped her bag on the bed and went back through to the entryway. "Hello, Marlie," Mark Talley said, his low voice filling the space. Marlie stopped short. What was he doing there? She worked to keep her expression neutral. "Mark, I came by to deliver some lumber for the gazebo." His eyes were magnetic, and she felt the familiar pull from all those years ago. Okay. Why was he inside the inn? Why not just deliver the wood and be gone? I'll be by late afternoon tomorrow to work further on it. Okay. Silence stretched between them, and she only kept herself from squirming. What was she supposed to say to him? And why was he just standing there looking at her? My fiancé is coming, she blurted and then nearly crumpled against the wide desk. Jared wasn't coming. She knew he wasn't coming. Why had she said that? What was she trying to prove? Mark frowned for a quick second and then smiled at her. His same broad, expansive smile. Why, that's great, Marlie. I look forward to meeting him. Coming tomorrow, then? She blinked at him and licked her upper lip. Yes. Tomorrow. He nodded and gave her a jaunty 2-finger salute. Good. I'm sure I'll meet him then. What's his name? Jared. He tipped his head. Jared. All right. He turned to go and then changed his mind, circling back to her. You all right, Marlie? His voice was gentle, almost intimate. Instant tears burned her eyes. Why was he being so kind to her? Especially after she'd just lied right to his face. But of course he wouldn't know that. I'm fine. He took another step closer, and her heart hammered against her ribs. If you need anything, you call me, okay? She fought to keep her tears from falling. Okay, she eked out around the growing lump in her throat. And then he laughed, a low chuckle that filled the room. It might help if you had my number. He glanced down at the top of the desk and then swirled the ledger back around to face him. He wrote his name in the upper margin along with his phone number. There you are, he said. Sleep well, Marlie. She let out her breath and watched him go. As soon as the door shut and the bell stopped tinkling, she burst into tears. What right did he have to look so good to be so nice? Why did his very presence transport her instantly back to her teen years when she'd hung on to every word he said? When she'd watched and admired his every move? No, no, no. She couldn't possibly still be in love with him. She'd been a child. She was all grown up now with a boyfriend of her own. She wiped at her tears, chastising herself soundly. When she wandered back into her parents' quarters, she realized that she had to stop thinking of Jared as just her boyfriend. He was her fiancé, like she'd announced so boldly to Mark. But later that night, it wasn't her fiancé that filled her thoughts. It was the boy from her childhood years who wouldn't give her any rest. Chapter 9. Mark got into his truck and drove away. Fiancé? She had a fiancé? Well, that shouldn't be a surprise. She was great-looking and sweet. He should be surprised that she wasn't already married. And why should he care anyway? No reason. No reason at all. He hadn't even thought of Marlie for months now. More like years. So why should he give her love life a second thought? Besides, he was due to pick up Rachel in. He glanced at the clock on his dashboard, 15 minutes. He hadn't canceled their date, even though he'd been tempted. Now he was glad he hadn't. He could use the distraction. He grimaced, shaking his head. He was quite certain Rachel wouldn't be thrilled to be his distraction that evening. Truth was, she was nice. He liked her. So, he would pick her up and they'd go to the movies and have a great time together just as he'd planned when he'd asked her. He attempted to shove Marlie from his thoughts, but the more he tried, the more she clung to them as if bolted there. He pulled into Rachel's driveway 10 minutes early. He saw the living room curtain pull to the side and knew she'd seen him, so he got right out and went to the door. He pushed the doorbell and waited a full 2 minutes before she answered. "Geez, Mark," she said, panting slightly. "You know better than to be early." "Sorry about that." She laughed. "Never mind. I'm ready now." She plucked her purse from a coat rack and walked past him onto the porch. He pulled the door shut and twisted the knob to make sure it was locked. "Shall we go?" She laughed again. "We shall." Moving to the truck, she paused outside the passenger door and waited for him to open it for her, which he did. Driving to the theater, Mark made every attempt to follow Rachel's chatter about her workday and the flat of petunias she'd just planted around her maple tree in her backyard. But it was a losing battle. He kept imagining the way Marlie's eyes teared up when he'd asked her how she was doing. He kept hearing her courageous, "I'm fine," and he couldn't stop wondering what Jared was like. She'd had a weird expression on her face when she had blasted out that little piece of fiancé information. But then it had been a rough day for her. He squelched the oddest urge to go back to the bed and breakfast and put his arms around her. She'd looked like she was in need of some major comforting. Why hadn't Jared come with her? Why wait until tomorrow? Didn't make any sense to him, but maybe the guy couldn't get out of work or something. "Well," Rachel demanded. He gave a start. "Huh? Well, what?" "Exactly as I thought. Where are you tonight, Mark Talley?" "You're certainly not in the truck with me." "I'm in Marlie's arms," came his immediate thought. He shook his head. Sorry. What were you saying?" She gave him a rueful smile. "Good grief. Why don't you tell me about your day instead?" He squeezed her leg. "Sorry, Rachel. My day was fine. Tell me more about your flowers." She rolled her eyes and gave him a playful punch in the shoulder. Marlie was up by 4 the next morning. She dragged herself out of the narrow guest bed and tromped into the bathroom. When she caught sight of her bleary eyes and mussed hair, she wondered whether she'd gotten any sleep at all. It was too early to call the hospital, but she was eager to know how her mother had fared during the night. If something drastic had happened, her father surely would have called. She went back to check her phone just in case she hadn't heard it. The screen was blank. She let out her breath with relief. In truth, she didn't want any more surprises. Unless they were good ones, of course. Had Mark Talley been a good surprise? She told herself no, but she wasn't convinced. She couldn't get the man out of her mind. What was he really like these days? Had his personality changed much since they were young? It hadn't seemed so. But then, a few minutes together would hardly be telling, would it? She went back to the bathroom and ran a brush through her hair. She leaned closer to the mirror and peered into her eyes. They were slightly puffy but not red. Good. She slipped out of her baggy t-shirt and undies and stepped into the shower. She stood for long minutes, letting the warm water run over her. Felt good. Refreshing. She didn't want to get out, but breakfast wasn't going to make itself. Reluctantly, she turned off the water and dried off. She dressed quickly in a light skirt and a rose-colored blouse, appropriate hostess attire for a bed and breakfast. She slipped into her flats and went out to the large chef-style kitchen. She raised the blinds even though the sun wasn't yet up. She got right to work on the muffins. From the notes on the chalkboard, she saw that 2 of the guests liked breakfast early at 6 o'clock. The others were fine with it at 8:30. When the first batch of muffins came out of the oven a half hour later, she realized that she may have overestimated the time she needed. She should have gotten up at 5 instead of 4. But now that she was up, maybe she could do some tidying up and some dusting. She opened the dishwasher and saw that it hadn't been run the day before. She tossed in the soap pellet and started it up. The horizon was lighting up a bit, but the backyard was still in shadows. She flipped on the outside light and paused. There it was. The beginnings of a large gazebo. She hadn't realized just how big it was going to be. From the looks of its foundation, it should be able to sit 8 or more people. She opened the back door and stepped outside onto the flagstone patio. She inhaled deeply of the morning air, catching the faint aroma of hyacinth. She glanced around, looking for the purple flowers, but it was still too dark beyond the reach of the porch light. She wandered out to the gazebo, over the dew-laden grass. She stepped up onto the floor and saw the shadowy stacks of wood and supplies to the side. She stood tall and then twirled, momentarily feeling as if she were on a mini dance platform. She laughed and did a pirouette, complete with her hands gracefully forming a circle above her head. How many hours had she spent as a young child pretending to be a ballerina? She'd performed for hours in her bedroom before her full-length mirror. But as she'd never told her mother about her ballerina aspirations, she'd never received any lessons. Marlie stopped twirling, wondering why she hadn't spoken of her desire for ballet lessons. She stood very still, thinking of other times throughout her life when she hadn't spoken out her real wishes. And why not? What was she afraid of? She thought of her mother, lying on a bed unable to speak, and wondered if there were many things in life that she had wanted but hadn't gone after. Tears filled Marlie's eyes. She hoped not. She looked back at the looming house with the light blazing from the kitchen window and the circle of soft light on the patio. This was her mother's dream. Right there in front of her. Marlie was determined that her mother would continue to have that very dream, even if it meant she had to come back to Tennessee more permanently. Her phone vibrated in her pocket and she retrieved it. Jared. Just going out for a run. Hope you have a good day. He was earlier than usual, but then, he always did complain that she slowed him down. He'd be surprised to know that she'd already been up long enough to make muffins. I'm up. Have a good run. Are you sure you can't come? She hesitated, her finger hovering about the send button. He'd already told her he wasn't coming, and she didn't fancy becoming a nagger. But still, how was she going to explain his absence to Mark? Honestly, she thought to herself, who cares what Mark thinks? But she pressed send anyway. Within seconds, she had her answer. You know I can't. Talk to you later. She grimaced, having expected that answer, but still feeling slightly annoyed. A light in one of the upstairs bedrooms flipped on. She supposed she should get back inside and set the large farm-style dining table. It looked like she was going to have company downstairs before long. She did one more twirl just for good measure and went back inside the house. Chapter 10. It was 12:30 before Marlie got to the hospital. She'd checked in the two new couples, made sure they were comfortable, gave them a printout of fun places to visit in the area, and then hopped into her car. She'd told her dad that she'd be much later than 10 so he wouldn't worry. When she entered her mother's room, his eyes lit up with pleasure. "You're here," he said. "Hi, Dad." She went to him and gave him a kiss on the cheek. And then she turned to her mother, who was looking at her intently. "Hi, Mom." Linda's eyes were teary. She opened her mouth and worked her jaw. Marlie held her breath, nearly bursting into tears as she watched her mother work so hard to squeeze out a warbled, "Hello!" Her father jumped up from his chair and went to her, taking her hand. "You spoke, honey. You spoke." Linda blinked up at him and let out her breath in a long sigh. Saying hello had worn her out. But she had done it. "Mom, you're doing so well." Marlie looked at her dad. "This is good, right?" He nodded, smiling through his tears. "This is very good. The doctor should be by soon. They put her on anti-clogging meds, and I knew he wants to check in again this afternoon." He grinned at Linda. "He's going to be so pleased." Linda closed her eyes and smiled. Only half of her mouth turned up, but Marlie didn't care. Her mother's speech, no matter how limited, was good news. She wondered when they'd be able to take her home, or if she'd have to go to a rehabilitation facility. When the doctor came by, she would ask. She looked at her dad. He was so overjoyed by her mother's one word. Her throat tightened and she had trouble swallowing. She glanced away, noting the various bouquets of flowers around the room. She wandered about, looking at the cards tucked into the petals, seeing who had sent them. A particularly bright bouquet of yellow and white daisies caught her eye. "Get well fast. The gazebo will be waiting for you. Love, Mark." "We just got those about a half hour ago," her father said, smiling at her. "Aren't they pretty? I don't know how Mark knew daisies are your mother's favorite." "My favorite, too," Marlie murmured, lightly touching the petals of one of the flowers. "He called this morning. I think he plans to stop by later this afternoon before going over to the inn." Marlie braced herself. "This afternoon? When?" "I'm not sure. He just mentioned it." Dan studied her. "Why?" She shook her head. "No reason. Just wondered." Her father moved to her side and spoke in a low voice. "Your mother will be spending a couple weeks in rehab when she's released. The doctor has recommended a good facility that handles most of the hospital's stroke patients. After that, I can bring her home. She can do any further therapy there." 2 weeks? Likely. If she does well, it could be sooner. How are you going to manage the bed and breakfast? He drew in a long breath. "I'll manage. Don't you worry your pretty head about it." Marlie frowned. "Well, my pretty head is worried about it. You can't do it alone. I have cleaning help. And I'm perfectly capable of making breakfast." Dad, she said, you can't cook worth a bean. I'll manage, Marlie. His voice took on an annoyed tone. I know, she said quickly. I'm sorry. Of course you can manage. She gave him a hug. I'll be right back. Where? Right back, she said again, slipping out of the room. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. There was no way her father could manage a business and deal with her mother. Even when her mother was in rehab, she knew her dad. He'd want to be with her as much as possible. She needed to stay. Indefinitely, it appeared. At least for a couple months. She had no idea what her boss would say. What Jared would say. She pulled her phone from her pocket and clicked Jared's photo. He answered immediately. Marlie, how's it going? Okay, I guess. Mom's going to need rehab. I don't think she'll be able to help at the inn for quite some time. Wow, that's tough. Dad can't do it alone. He'll have to hire someone. I don't think there's money for that. From what I can tell, it's going to have to be someone full-time for a while. Jared? Yeah, I'm going to have to stay. A long pause. And then I figured you'd stay the week. You mean longer? Irritation swept through her. Of course, I mean longer. Did you even hear what I just said? Mom isn't going to be able to do much for a long time. You don't know that. And why are you getting so angry with me? I haven't done anything. I'm going to miss you. You're 2 states away and we just got engaged. She tried to breathe evenly, tried to calm down. If he would just drive down, at least for a little while. Jared! What? Can't you take some vacation time? We're not going on that cruise now. I'm well aware that we're not going on that cruise which I planned so carefully and spent a bundle on. And no, I'm not taking vacation time to sit around at the hospital. I'm saving my vacation time for us. She pulled the phone from her ear and stared at it. For us? He just didn't get it. She needed him. Needed his support. She wanted him there. She pressed the phone back to her ear. Look, he said, his voice contrite. We'll talk on the phone a few times every day. We can video call when I'm not at work. It'll be practically the same thing as me being there. Right, she said stiffly, now wanting the conversation to be over. I love you, babe, he said softly. Yeah. Me too, she said, feeling an unwelcome swell of resentment. I really have to go now. I'll call you later. She hung up and didn't give herself time to process their conversation. She didn't want to think about it. If she did, she might end up doing something she'd regret. She immediately called Chantal. Hey, Marlie. I've been worried. How's your mom? She said hello today. Did she? That's great. Chantal paused. I guess that's great. Is it great, Marlie? Marlie smiled. It's great. Chantal, I'm going to need to stay for at least 2 months. Maybe more. Dad needs my help. And so does Mom. 2 months. At least. You think the boss will go for it? I don't know. Maybe. You could work from there for a lot of the stuff, right? I think I could. Well, she's in a good mood today, so now is the time to ask. Okay. Thanks. I'll call her. Chantal? Yeah. I'm scared for my mom. I'm sure you are. I'm praying for her. For you too and your dad. Maybe I can come down there next weekend. Would that be helpful? Or would I just be in the way? Be honest. Would you really come? Could you? It's a long drive. I know how far it is. Then yes. It would be helpful. Next weekend? Next weekend. Thanks for calling and for the update. I really have been worried. You're welcome. And Chantal? You're the best. Chantal laughed. Back at you, she said, and they hung up. Marlie took a deep breath and called her boss. Chapter 11. You're sure? Dan said, his eyebrows raised. I don't want you losing your job over this. I'm sure, Dad. I'm going to be doing a lot of work from here. And we'll group video call my meetings. This means I won't be completely available, but I can man the front desk and I can do breakfasts, and in the evenings I can help with any laundry and such. We have a gal who helps clean. Marlie, you know that. Yes, I know that. I just don't want you to worry. You can spend a lot of time with Mom. You're sure? Marlie sighed. Please stop asking if I'm sure. I'm sure. And I don't have to start work till next week. This week is vacation time. Her dad smiled with obvious relief. Some vacation, huh? Better than any old European vacation, she teased, knowing how she used to dream out loud about European vacations when she was in high school. Thanks, honey. A huge thanks. To your mother and I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. Truly. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. He nodded and wiped at his eyes. I'm turning into a real ball baby these days. Understandable. Marlie took his hand. How much sleep did you get last night? He shrugged. I got some. Tonight you're going home. He started to protest, but she shook her head. I'm serious, Dad. The Mom will be fine. She looked at Linda. Won't you, Mom? Linda nodded and opened her mouth, but then closed it again. See? Mom agrees. Marlie let go of her dad's hand. And Dad? You need a shower and a change of clothes. I showered here. Doesn't count. Go on home. At least for a few hours. Check on the guests if you want. I'll stay here until you return. Besides, maybe I want a bit of mother and daughter time without my big old lunk of a father. Dan laughed. Big old lunk, huh? Yep. Now go on. Please. Dan stood and picked up his light jacket, which was tossed at the end of a narrow rollaway. Fine. I'm going. He stepped to his wife and leaned over, kissing her on the cheek. I'll be back soon. Linda's mouth screwed up, leaving half of it hanging limp. Bye, she got out, and then her eyes brightened with the accomplishment. Dan grinned. Bye, honey. Marlie spent the next hours sitting quietly beside her mother. Linda dozed and nurses came in to check her vitals, but other than that, it was a quiet afternoon. Marlie debated about whether to talk with her mother about her engagement, but decided not to. She wondered at her decision, knowing that such news would be welcomed by Linda. Nevertheless, Marlie couldn't seem to get the words out of her mouth. She smiled ruefully at herself. Perhaps she'd had a stroke too. Around 4:30, the partially open door widened and Mark Talley walked into the room. Marlie looked up in surprise, and her heart did a flip. Hi, Marlie, he said, then looked at Linda. Hi, Linda. How are you doing today? Linda gave him her half smile and nodded. She's doing really well today, Marlie said. I think in one more day she'll be moving out. Oh. His brow raised. Yep. To wonderful new accommodations at Plainview Rehabilitation Center. I see. Sounds mighty luxurious. He looked at Linda and winked. I wonder if they have a gazebo. Linda blinked and smiled. Well, if they do, it won't have anything on the one that's taking shape in your backyard. Mark stepped closer to the bed and took Linda's hand in his. Marlie backed away slightly, feeling Mark's presence too acutely from her perch by the side of the bed. She could smell his cologne, and the woodsy scent tickled her senses. She found herself wanting to breathe it in, to fill herself with it. She shivered. How absurd. Marlie, have you eaten? He asked her. No. It's early yet. True. But I wondered if you'd like to grab a bite. Where? In the cafeteria? A strange look flashed over his face, but then he smiled. No. I was thinking that maybe at the deli just down the street. We would only be gone for an hour at most. Marlie looked at her mother, who was gazing at her intently. I don't want to leave, Mom. Linda's gaze grew more intent. Go, she uttered. At least that was what Marlie thought she said. It came out more like, oh. See, even your mother wants you to go, Mark said with amusement in his voice. Maybe when Dad comes back, Marlie said. I told him I'd stay while he's gone. Sure. Mark pulled a chair from where it rested against a wall and brought it closer to the bed before sitting on it. I'd like to pass some time with Linda anyway. He looked at her mother and grinned. Now, when do you think you'll be able to make me some blueberry muffins? Linda looked delighted with the question. She raised her right hand and held up 2 fingers. 2 hours? Mark asked, teasing. Linda smiled. 2 days? 2 weeks? Mark's animated voice filled the room with a lightness that hadn't been there since Marlie had arrived the day before. Maybe 2 months. He laughed and playfully nudged Marlie. Your mom makes the best blueberry muffins in the state of Tennessee. Of course, you already know that. I do, Marlie agreed and couldn't help but chuckle. I do know that. I'll be waiting eagerly for them, Mark told Linda. No matter when you make them. Linda nodded, and there was a twinkle in her eye. Marlie looked at Mark with deep appreciation. He'd known just what to say, just how to act. She wanted to throw herself in his arms and ask him to talk to her, to give her just the right words she needed to hear. And what were those anyway? She had no idea. Before long, Dan was back. He greeted Mark enthusiastically and then took up his spot next to Linda. We're going to grab something to eat, Mark said, standing. Do you want us to bring you anything? Dan shook his head. No need. I ate something at home. Has Linda's meal come yet? Not yet, Marlie said. Do you want me to wait with you for it? She suddenly needed an excuse not to go with Mark to the deli. Why? No, you 2 kids go on and eat, Dan said and waved them off. Chapter 12. Marlie and Mark were silent in the ride down the elevator. Marlie kept her eyes on the button panel as if it needed her full attention to deliver them safely to the ground floor. She felt Mark studying her, and she barely kept herself from squirming. When the elevator doors opened, they both got out. Mark put his hand on the small of her back, guiding her to the front entrance, and she felt the whisper of his touch down to her toes. Are you hungry? He asked. They pushed through the revolving door. Actually, I am a little. Good. Do you know the cow deli? She gave him a look. The cow deli? He laughed. The decor is all bovines. It's actually pretty interesting and the food is great. I'll trust you on that. They walked through the parking lot toward the main street. Mark, someone called. They both turned around. Marlie watched as a short, slender blonde came their way. She felt Mark stiffen beside her. Hi, Rachel, he said. She approached them in a whirl. Her expression first showed delight and then tightened as she gazed at Marlie. Hello, she said. Hi, Marlie answered, feeling the tension in the air. I'm Marlie, an old friend of Mark's. Who was this woman? It was clear that she was staking her claim on Mark, for she took his hand before facing Marlie square on. I'm Rachel, Mark's girlfriend. Something flickered over Mark's face, and it wasn't pleasure. Oh, Marlie said, recovering quickly. How nice to meet you. You heading for your shift? Mark asked, his voice slightly stilted. Yes. They put me on the late shift today. Where are you going? To grab a bite. Marlie's mom is in the hospital and we're trying to keep her spirits up. I see, Rachel said, looking again at Marlie. Why not eat in the cafeteria? And then Marlie understood. Mark hadn't wanted to eat in the cafeteria because he hadn't wanted to run into his girlfriend. Disgusting. But Marlie decided to bail him out anyway. I needed some fresh air, she said. You know how sitting in a hospital room wears on you. Rachel relaxed a bit. It does. That's true. She reached up and kissed Mark's cheek. I'll see you later then. Later, he said, and she walked away. So, that's why the cow deli. He shrugged. Partially. But I did want you to get some fresh air. There is that. She's not my girlfriend. She thinks she is. He paused and glanced back toward the hospital. Yes, she seems to. We've dated a bit. I didn't realize. Marlie gazed at him. Guys can be so dumb sometimes. He laughed. I fear you're right about that. She laughed with him and they continued walking. So, what about your fiancé? Is he dumb too? At times, Marlie wondered what Jared would think of her going to a deli with another guy. Should she turn back? Would this be considered a date? She frowned. It was hardly a date. But still, if she were honest with herself, she was enjoying it like it was a date. In truth, she was enjoying being with Mark entirely too much. She was aware of his every move, his every expression. And she wanted to know more about him. Certainly, that wasn't how a newly engaged girl thought. And the whole engagement thing pressed on her like a thorn. She didn't believe Jared had wanted to propose in the first place. Hadn't she forced his hand? Maybe not intentionally, or maybe it had been intentional. But she didn't feel good about it. Right then, she didn't feel good about Jared at all. Marlie! Marlie gave a start, looking at Mark. What? Where were you? Geez, I was talking to myself. Sorry. I was thinking about some things. He gave her a knowing smile. Your fiancé? Yes. Where is he? Wasn't he supposed to be here today? I figured I would have already met him. She swallowed. He couldn't make it. Mark stopped walking. He couldn't make it? No, she said and continued walking. He couldn't. Mark caught up with her in 2 long strides. I'm sorry. You must be disappointed. She grimaced. Not for the reason you think. She clapped her hand over her mouth. Oh, I'm sorry. I must be tired. I don't even know what I'm saying. But she did know. And she was going to have a long talk with Jared that evening. Mark looked like he wanted to say something, but he remained quiet. They approached the cow deli, and like Mark had told her, there were cow motifs everywhere. Even a large plastic cow ushered them inside with a sign painted on his forehead. Marlie looked around in awe, already feeling better. No, this wasn't a date. It was simply 2 old friends having dinner in an amusing restaurant. They both ordered ham and cheese on rye with sprouts and avocado. It was delicious, and before Marlie knew it, they had finished their meal and even lingered over their soft drinks. She looked at her phone. Oh, I need to get back, she said. Dad will be wondering. Mark tucked a generous tip under his plate. Me too. I wanted to get some work done on the gazebo. Marlie grinned at him. Not taking Rachel out later, huh? She said it in a teasing tone, but in truth, she felt a pang in her heart. Nope. I've got work to do. He put his arm around her shoulders and gave her a quick squeeze. Then he dropped his arm as if regretting the hug. They left the deli, and Marlie could hardly concentrate on their conversation as they returned to the hospital. She kept feeling his arm around her, his reassuring squeeze. She wanted to feel it again. She wanted to let herself be enveloped by him. She wanted to bury herself in him. She gulped. "I'll go the rest of the way by myself," she stammered. "See you around." And she increased her speed until she was nearly running. She needed to put some serious distance between the two of them. Chapter 13. Mark watched her go. She was racing away from him. What had he said? Was it because he'd put his arm around her? And why had he done that anyway? Was he insane? Marlie was engaged. But old friends hugged, didn't they? Who was he kidding? He hadn't hugged her because she was an old friend. He'd hugged her because she was amazing and soft and vulnerable. He had an overwhelming urge to take care of her. The way she laughed, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, the way she tossed her head so that her hair fell behind her shoulders. She fascinated him, and he wanted to touch her, hold her, kiss her. Whoa. He needed to slow down. Way down. Marlie wasn't available. And according to Rachel, he wasn't either. He was going to have to talk with Rachel. Since when did she consider herself his girlfriend? Was that to be assumed after a few dates? He wasn't aware of that new rule. He rolled his eyes and headed back toward the hospital parking lot. Rachel was a great gal. She was. And before he'd clapped his eyes on Marlie again, he'd been happy to date her. Now, not so much. He pulled out his cell phone and considered texting Rachel to ask to talk with her. But then she'd probably be upset for her entire shift. He would wait until the next day. He would call her first thing in the morning. He was about to put his phone away when it pinged. His forehead creased. Rachel had beat him to it. So who is she really? I knew her as a kid. She's Sally's and Austin's cousin. Remember, I practically lived with them. Mark, tell me the truth. That is the truth. You like her. Mark groaned. Was he so obvious? Course I like her. She's my friend. But even as he typed the words, he cringed. What a coward. Rachel didn't write back immediately, and Mark reconsidered. Rachel deserved the truth. You're right. I like her. Okay. That was it? Okay. What did that even mean? Rachel, we should talk. I think we just did. He waited for more, but Rachel went silent. He waited another minute and then typed one more line. I'm sorry, Rachel. You're a wonderful person. He hoped that didn't sound patronizing because he hadn't mean it that way. She really was a wonderful person. But Marlie had upset his world. Even though she was engaged and out of reach, he couldn't continue with Rachel. So he supposed he was dateless now. He glanced at the hospital, his eyes traveling up to the 3rd floor. Marlie was up there now. Hopefully she wasn't still running. Why was she trying to escape him? Was it possible that she felt something for him too? And what would that mean for her? He got into his truck and slammed the door. Just what Marlie needed was more stress. He needed to stay away from her. And where was this fiancé of hers? What a jerk. He should be there. He started his engine and drove out of the lot. Marlie stopped outside her mother's hospital room and took several deep breaths. What in the world was she thinking, running off like that? Mark must think she was a child. But she'd had to get away from him. He was dangerous. She leaned against the wall and took out her phone. Jared answered on the first ring. Hey, Marlie. How's it going? It's going all right, I guess. She blew out her breath. Jared, maybe you could come for the weekend. Would that work? Geez, Marlie, you don't give up, do you? I need you here. And she did. She needed him there to bring her back to reality, to stop these insane feelings that kept bubbling up toward Mark. If Jared were there, she could find some sense of normalcy again. And it would be nice for him to spend time with her parents, especially her dad. Neither of them knew Jared well. This would be a good chance for all of them. I have to work Saturday, but it's the weekend. I know that, Marlie. She could hear the exaggerated patience in his voice. But you know I often have to put in extra hours on the weekends. If your boss knew my mom had a stroke, I'm sure he'd understand. Marlie, look. I've already made it clear that I won't be coming. Let's video chat tonight. Or can you now? Marlie closed her eyes. She didn't want a video chat. She wanted to speak to him in person. I'm in the hospital hallway right now. Okay. Then later, maybe? Maybe. Look, everything's going to be all right. If you end up staying more than a week or so, I can try to work something out. All right? I already told you that I probably have to stay much longer. Yes, but you never know, right? Your mom might bounce back really quickly. Right? Her voice was tight. She tried to relax, tried to muster up some understanding for Jared, but it wasn't there. Was he always this self-centered? Or was she being self-centered by wanting him there? Her thoughts went to Mark. He'd sent flowers, he'd visited, he'd checked on all of them. If he were in Jared's shoes, she was certain he would have dropped everything to come with her. She blanched. How could she know that? She couldn't, could she? But she did. She knew it to the bottom of her heart. Jared? Yeah, I think we should take a step back. Reconsider our engagement. What? What are you saying? Is this because I didn't come with you to Tennessee? She suddenly felt very tired. Partly. Fine. I'll come then. Geez, Marlie. No. Don't come. And then it dawned on her. This was exactly how he'd proposed to her, too. Because she had pushed. Jared, we'll talk later. I have to go see my mom now. Marlie! She hung up. Her phone immediately buzzed and she pushed it on silent. Was this how it was going to be? If she married Jared, would her whole life be pushing him? Pushing him to be there for her? He would hate it, and so would she. Wouldn't they end up hating each other? She swallowed and her throat tightened. Yes, she would hate it. And she would end up hating herself, too. She didn't want to be that way. Jared didn't get it. Not for her. For some other girl, maybe. But not for her. She drew in a shaky breath. She'd been with Jared for over a year now. She loved him. At least she thought she did. Now she wasn't so sure. Maybe their relationship had just become a convenience for both of them, something they were used to. She looked at her phone again and pressed a button. Marlie? That you? Hi, Chantal. It's me. Her voice caught. What is it? Are you crying? Has something happened with your mom? No. No. It isn't that. Then what is it? Jared. Chantal sucked in a loud breath. What did he do? I think it's over. What? Weren't you supposed to get engaged? What do you mean? What happened? I don't think I love him anymore. I'm wondering if I ever did. Marlie, talk to me. What in the world happened? Marlie slumped with her back against the wall. Everything is forced. The engagement. The what? Chantal squealed. So you are engaged? Kind of. I pushed it. Marlie sighed heavily. I push everything. He's not even coming, Chantal. I've asked and asked. I told him how much I need him here, but maybe he's busy. Yeah, busy. I'm sorry. You're right. He should be there. But do you think you should make this kind of decision right now? You've had a major shock, and I know you're run down. I am run down. But I'm seeing this quite clearly. There was a silence, but Marlie didn't mind. Chantal was digesting. Then, if you're seeing it clearly, do what you need to do. You know your own heart. I do, Marlie said, her mind going to Mark. I do know my own heart, but be sure, because you might not be able to take it back. I know. Keep me posted, will you? Chantal said softly, her voice calm. I will. Thanks, Chantal. I'll be there next weekend. You still want me to come? I still want you to come. Okay. I'll be praying for you. I know. And my mom and dad, okay? Of course. Bye, Chantal. Marlie hung up after Chantal's goodbye. She felt better and even more certain that cutting it off with Jared was the right thing to do. She slipped her phone into her purse and went into her mother's room. Chapter 14. Mark stepped back from the half-finished gazebo and smiled. It was looking fine. Linda had wanted a fairly large one, capable of seating 8 to 10 people. He was making this one to seat 10. When he finished the construction, he'd arrange someone to come and landscape around it. He envisioned colorful clematis climbing up the sides, weaving in and out of the latticework. It would be beautiful. Would Marlie like it? He scoffed at himself. What difference did that make? Linda was at the rehabilitation center now. She had been for 3 days. Her progress was steady, and he knew that both Dan and Marlie were relieved. Marlie had taken over plenty of duties at the inn, and she was also working long distance on her regular job, according to her dad. Mark had kept away from her. He was also doing his best to keep his thoughts off her, but that was turning into a fiasco. Especially when he could spot her sometimes through the kitchen window and see her brown hair falling gently over her shoulders while she fussed with something or did the dishes or whatever it was she was doing in there. Times like that, he had to force himself to look away. One evening, he'd caught her eye. He'd seen her face light up, but he'd turned quickly away, not wanting to prolong the moment. He'd visited Linda the day before and had chatted with Dan for a while. One of Marlie's friends was coming from Indiana that weekend. He hoped to have the gazebo ready. Then Marlie and her friend could enjoy it, as well as the guests. He glanced behind him at his stack of supplies. There should be plenty to finish it up. There even might be an extra piece of lattice that he could put at the back edge of the porch. It'd look great on the end there and give a place for Linda to put some climbing roses or something. He held to the hope that Linda would fully recover, enough to garden anyway. According to Dan, her therapists were cautiously hopeful. The back door opened, and Mark looked over to see Marlie come outside. He stiffened. There was no way to avoid her now. He could hardly turn his back and leave. "Hi, Mark," she said, walking out to him carrying a glass of lemonade. "I thought you might be thirsty." He nodded. "That was nice of you." "Thanks." He reached out to take the glass from her, and his knuckles grazed her hand. Instant awareness shot through him. She studied his face, and her mouth softened. He groaned inwardly. If she didn't leave right then, he would take her in his arms. He stepped back and took a long, cold drink. "That hits the spot," he said, his voice thick. He cleared his throat. "Thank you." "You're welcome," she answered, her eyes not leaving his. Mark shifted his weight. "I better get back to it. Go away. Go away, Marlie. You're killing me." "You're not finished for the evening?" she asked. Yeah, I guess I am." He handed the lemonade back to her so abruptly that it nearly sloshed over both their hands. Thanks again. She blinked and took the glass. I'll see you later, he muttered and turned away. Lord, but she looks good. Why does she have to wear clothes that fit her so, well? Why do her eyes have to be so big and wide and innocent? Why does she have to? Bye, Mark. Without turning around, he raised his arm and waved. 2 days later, Marlie walked out to her car with a smile on her face. Her mom was doing well. Much better than the therapists had expected. Much of her speech had returned. She lisped and there were lags between words, but she could be understood. Her dad was beside himself. Thank you, God, Marlie whispered, looking up into the blue, cloudless sky. Thank you so much. She got into her car and glanced at the clock on her Chantal should be there within the hour. She could hardly wait to see her friend. There was a lot to share. She'd spoken again with Jared, and after talking for more than an hour, she had broken it off with him. She'd expected to cry herself to sleep that night, but she hadn't. Instead, she'd felt oddly relieved. She put the car in gear and drove back to the bed and breakfast. She'd been able to juggle her duties there with a good 4 hours of online work each day. Her boss had been surprisingly accommodating. She would have to take a pay cut for not working full-time, but the way Marlie figured it, she could keep this going for a couple months at least. Maybe longer, if she did something about her apartment. She wondered if her lease allowed subletting. Something to check into. New guests were arriving any minute. Couple from Virginia. Marlie had spoken with them on the phone a few times, and they seemed quite nice. She parked her car behind the house and got out. There was nothing more beautiful or inspiring than a sun-filled Tennessee day. She inhaled deeply, smelling the wisteria and honeysuckle that climbed the trellises. And then she hurried inside. All was quiet. She went through to the kitchen and glanced out the window at the nearly completed gazebo. From what she could tell, all it needed was a coat or two of paint. She sighed. Mark had been so odd around her lately. If she didn't know better, she'd say he was avoiding her. She'd wanted to tell him that she and Jared had broken up, but he'd given her no opportunity. Yet she wanted him to know. How she wanted him to know. With a sigh, she stepped away from the window and opened the fridge to check her supplies for breakfast the next morning. There was plenty, especially if she made apple muffins again. Maybe Chantal would like to help her. She heard a car out front, probably the new guests. She ran her hand over her hair and hurried to the front door to welcome them. She heard someone coming up the steps and threw open the door. Her mouth dropped open. Hello, Marlie. Marlie gaped at Jared. What are you doing here? He shrugged and then spread his hands. You wanted me to come, so I came. She blinked, still not believing her eyes. That was before, she said. We broke up. Remember? You didn't mean it, he countered. Aren't you going to ask me in? We can sit out here. She walked stiffly toward the plush wicker furniture arranged in the middle of the sweeping front porch. He caught her hand, but she wiggled it free. He sighed and sat down on the bench, patting the spot beside him. She sank down in the chair across from him. What are you doing here, Jared? Wasn't I clear on the phone? He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Marlie, you can't just break us up. We've been together a long time. Makes no sense. The more I thought about it, the more it doesn't make sense. I think you're just stressed because of your mom's issue. Marlie's mouth had gone dry. She stared at him. My mom's issue? Her voice rose with each word. My mom had a major stroke. She's in rehab right now, learning to function normally again. Something you would know more about had you come when I asked you to. I'm here now. So what's a few days' difference? It's been nearly 2 weeks, Jared. He sighed. So, it's been a while. I'm here now. I don't want you here. You practically begged me to come, and now you act all distant. Marlie jumped to her feet. Because we broke up. What's the matter with you? He rose also, stepping to her. He grasped both of her arms. I love you, Marlie, and you love me. I'm sorry I didn't come earlier, but I'm here now. I made arrangements to stay for 2 days. 2 days, Marlie. Well, you can just unmake your arrangements, she said, pulling her arms free. I'm sorry, Jared. It's over. He shook his head. No, it's not over. I've done everything you wanted me to do. I asked you to marry me. I came to Tennessee. He looked around as if he still couldn't believe that he'd actually come. That's the thing. Right there. You did what I wanted you to do. But what about you? What do you want? An overwhelming sadness came over Marlie then. She looked into Jared's eyes and a heaviness rested on her. I want us to be together again, he said after a long moment. I believe you. But do you really want to be engaged? And you didn't want to come. I needed you, Jared, and you didn't want to come. He was silent. His eyes shadowed. We had something good, she went on. At first. But we're too different. I want someone who loves me enough to drop everything when I need him. And I would do the same for him. So, you're saying that you would have dropped everything if the situation were reversed? You would have come even though it was highly inconvenient? Even though your boss wouldn't have liked it? Her forehead crinkled. Of course. In a flash. He shook his head, and she realized that he still didn't get it. I appreciate you coming now, Jared. But it's too late, you're too. She was interrupted by a truck pulling right up to the porch. Her eyes widened. Why in the world did Mark have to show up right then? He'd see her with Jared and assume they were still together. Still engaged. She stiffened and braced herself for what was to come. Chapter 15. Mark got out of the truck and gave her a long look, and then his gaze went to Jared. He made a move to continue around to the gazebo area, but then he paused. He rubbed his hands on his pants and walked to the porch steps. Hello, he said to Jared. You must be Marlie's fiancé. And Marlie started, but Jared cut her off. I am, he said with a big smile, going down the steps with his hand extended. No, he's not, Marlie said. He used to be. Jared laughed. Pay her no mind. We've had a bit of a squabble is all. He gave Marlie a loving gaze. She'll come around. Irritation flared through Marlie. Jared, she said, please go. And who might you be? Jared asked Mark. The handyman, Jared said, his expression turning dark. Marlie ran down the steps to where they were standing. Jared is just leaving. I barely got here, Marlie. He looked at Mark. How do you know my fiancé? Marlie stomped her foot. Jared, please leave. What's going on here? Mark asked, visibly tensing. You all right, Marlie? I'm fine. Jared is just leaving. Jared turned to her, and the look of regret in his eyes nearly made her burst into tears. But tears wouldn't help anything now. She'd already spent too much time in tears during the last days. You're sure, Marlie? Jared asked, his voice low and soft. She clasped his hand. I'm sure, Jared. I'm sorry. He let out a long sigh. Can't blame a guy for trying. She tried to swallow past the lump in her throat. Trying? Maybe, but too late. Way too late. I guess I'll be going then. His cheeks were flushed, and he gave an embarrassed nod to Mark. Nice to meet you. Likewise, Mark uttered. Jared went back to his car and got in. Within seconds, he was gone. What was that? Mark asked, staring at Marlie. Marlie let out her breath in a long sigh. I broke up with him a few days ago. Mark brightened. You did? I did. But you never said. You never gave me a chance. You've been avoiding me, haven't you? Mark looked into her eyes. Yes. Why? Her voice had drifted into a hushed whisper. There was a pensive look in the back of his eyes. Because? Because why? I like you, Marlie. When I saw you in the cafeteria right after your mom's stroke, I felt like, well, he hesitated. What? You felt like what? Her heart pounded and she held her breath. Like I had come home. Why, you did, she stammered in bewilderment. I did. And then he took her in his arms, pressing her to his chest. She felt like a young girl of 17 again, and she relaxed, sinking into his cushioning embrace. He was home to her, too, and she buried herself in his chest. They stood like that, pressed together, for a long moment. His nearness was overwhelming, and the very feel of his strong arms around her, the feel of his heart beating against hers, sent delightful shivers through her body. Mark, she whispered. He gently cupped her chin and raised her face to his. And then his mouth came down on hers. His demanding lips were hard and searching, and she strained toward him, wanting to be as close as possible. Wanting all of him. This was how it should be. This hunger, this knowing, this yearning. This was what it felt like to be truly in love. She felt tears sting the back of her eyes, and she returned his kiss with a passion that surprised her. She heard a soft groan deep in his throat. Marlie, he mumbled against her mouth. Marlie. His kiss softened, and his lips were warm and sweet now. There was a dreamy intimacy to their kiss, and Marlie wanted to never move from this place. She wanted to never leave his arms. But then she remembered. Wait, she said, pulling slightly away. What about Rachel? We're over, he said, grabbing her to him again. Another car came into the drive, and they drew apart. I have guests coming any minute, she said. But then she saw who it was. Chantal, she cried, waving wildly. Chantal parked her hybrid next to Mark's truck and got out. Marlie extricated herself from Mark's embrace and ran down the steps to hug her. You're here. I'm here. And pooped. What a drive, Chantal said with a huge grin. She looked up at Mark on the porch and then back to Marlie. Who is this? Marlie grabbed her friend's hand and dragged her up the steps. Chantal, I want you to meet Mark, my boyfriend. Mark gave Marlie a wide smile and then stretched his hand to Chantal. Nice to meet you, he said. The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Marjorie Evans. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Marjorie Evans, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Marjorie Evans romance.